Sarah had always been cautious. Growing up in a small town, her parents had drilled into her the dangers of hitchhiking. But tonight was different. Her car had broken down miles from home, and the autumn chill was setting in. She had no choice but to stick out her thumb and hope for a kind stranger. After what felt like an eternity, an old, rusty pickup truck pulled over. The driver, a middle-aged man with deep-set eyes and a disarming smile, leaned over and opened the passenger door. "Need a lift?" he asked. Sarah hesitated but nodded. "Thank you." "My car broke down back there." "No problem. Hop in," he said, patting the seat next to him. As they drove, the man made small talk, asking about her life and sharing stories from his own. He seemed friendly enough, but there was something off about him that Sarah couldn't quite place. His hands, she noticed, were covered in old scars, and his eyes never seemed to stay on the road for long. "So, where are you headed?" he finally asked. "Just into town," Sarah replied. "I live on Maple Street." The man's face darkened for a moment. "Maple Street? Haven't heard of that place in years. Strange things happen there." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "Folks go missing. Hitchhikers, mostly. Like you," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Sarah's unease grew, but she forced a smile. "Well, I'm sure it's just rumors." The man chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Maybe. But you never know, do you?" They drove in silence for a while, the road growing narrower and more isolated. Sarah glanced at the man, who seemed lost in thought, his eyes reflecting a strange intensity. She gripped her phone tightly, but there was no signal. Suddenly, the truck slowed down and turned onto a dirt road. Sarah's pulse quickened. "This isn't the way to town." The man smiled again, but it no longer reached his eyes. "Just a shortcut." Sarah's instincts screamed at her to get out. "I think I'll just walk from here," she said, trying to sound casual. The man's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, his grip like a vice. "Don't be silly. It's dangerous out there." Panic surged through Sarah as she struggled to pull away. "Let me go." But the man only tightened his hold, his friendly facade vanishing to reveal something far more sinister. "You're not going anywhere." With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah yanked her arm free and flung open the door, tumbling out of the moving truck. She hit the ground hard, pain shooting through her body, but she didn't stop. She scrambled to her feet and ran into the dense woods, branches tearing at her clothes and skin. Behind her, she heard the truck screech to a halt, and the man cursing. "You can't run forever," he shouted. Sarah ran until her lungs burned, and her legs felt like lead. She could hear the man's heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush, getting closer. Desperation pushed her onward until she stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin. She darted inside, slamming the door behind her and fumbling for a lock. The cabin was dark and musty, filled with decaying furniture and broken windows. She crouched in a corner, trying to quiet her ragged breathing. Minutes felt like hours as she listened for any sign of her pursuer. Then she heard it, the slow, deliberate creak of the cabin door opening. A figure stood silhouetted against the night, the man's eyes gleaming with malevolence. "There you are," he whispered, stepping inside. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She searched frantically for something to defend herself with, her hand closing around a rusty old knife. As the man approached, she sprang up and slashed wildly. The man howled in pain, clutching his arm, but he didn't stop. He lunged at her, and they both fell to the floor, grappling for control of the knife. In the struggle, Sarah felt a sharp, searing pain in her side. She gasped as the man twisted the knife, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "You're mine now," he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. But Sarah wasn't done yet. Summoning every ounce of strength, she shoved the man off and staggered to her feet, blood pouring from her wound. She stumbled out of the cabin and into the night, the forest closing in around her. Behind her, the man's laughter echoed through the trees. "Run all you want. I'll find you." Sarah ran, her vision blurring and her strength fading. She didn't know how far she could go, but she knew she had to try. The night swallowed her up, leaving nothing but the whisper of the wind and the distant haunting laughter of the man who would forever haunt her nightmares.